Greetings. Simon Belmont coming to you. As you all well know, we're trapped inside for the most part due to the circumstances going on. So I'd like to take this time to share with you a story. The book of which I'm reading is The Foundling by Lloyd. This is a collection of small tales surrounding the Chronicles of Prydain, and is a wonderful set of adventures. Should you choose to delve into the books of the Book of Three, The Black Cauldron, Castle of Fleer, and more. So the first story I'm bringing you today is about the great enchanter Dolben and how he rose to be. What is so great about this enchanter? Well, let's read the tale and find out. Because he plays a key role in the events of the books. Much like Gandalf of Lord of the Rings. Much like Elminster of the Forgotten Realms. So, let's see where this takes us. And I bring to you The Foundling. This is told of Dolben, greatest of enchanters of Prydain, how 3 black-robed hags found him when he was still a baby in a basket at the edge of the marshes of Morva. "Oh, Ordu, see what's here?" cried one named Orwin, peering into the wicker vessel floating amid the tall grasses. "Poor lost duckling, he'll catch his death of cold. Whatever will we do with him?" "A sweet morsel," croaked the one named Orgoch from the depths of her hood. "A tender lamb. I know what I should do." "Please be silent, Orgoch," said the one named Ordu. "You've already had your breakfast." Ordu was a short, plump woman with a round, lumpy face, sharp, black eyes. Jewels, pins, and brooches glittered in her tangle of weedy hair. "We can't leave him here to get all soggy, I suppose. We shall have to take him home with us." "Oh, yes," exclaimed Orwin, dangling her string of milky white beads over the tiny figure in the basket. "Ah, the darling tadpole. Look at his pink cheeks and chubby little fingers. He's smiling at us, Ordu. He's waving. But what shall we call him? He mustn't go bare and nameless." "If you ask me," began Orgosh. "No one did," replied Ordu. "You are quite right, Orwin. We must give him a name. Otherwise, how shall we know who he is?" "We have so many names lying around the cottage," said Orwin. "Some of them never used. Give him a nice, fresh, unwrinkled one." "There's a charming name I've been saving for a special occasion," Ordu said, "but I can't remember what I did with it." "No matter. His name. Dolben. Lovely! Cried Orwin, clapping her hands. Oh, Ordu, you have such good taste. Taste indeed, snorted Durgan. Dalvin? Why call him Dalvin? Why not? Returned Ordu. It will do splendidly. Very good quality. Very durable. It should last him a lifetime. And so Dalvin was named and nursed by these three and given a home in their cottage in the marshes of Morva. Under their care he grew sturdy, bright, and fair of face. He was kind and generous, and each day handsomer and happier. The hags did not keep from him that he was a foundling. But when he was of an age to wonder about such matters, he asked where indeed he had come from, and what the rest of the world was like. My dear chickens, replied Ordu, as to where you came from, we haven't the slightest notion, nor, might I say, the least interest. You're here with us now, to our delight, and that's quite enough to know. As to the rest of the world, Orwin added, don't bother your pretty curly head about it. You can be sure it doesn't bother about you. Be glad you were found instead of drowned. Why, this very moment you might be part of a school of fish, and what slippery, scaly sort of life that would be. I like fish, said Orgosh, especially eels. Do hush, dear Orgosh, said Ordu. You're always thinking of your stomach. Despite his curiosity, Dalvin saw there was no use in questioning further. Cheerful and willing, he went about every task with an eagerness and good grace. He drew pails of water from the well, kept the fire burning in the hearth, pumped the bellows, swept away the ashes, and dug the garden. No toil was too troublesome for him. When Ordu spun thread, he turned the spinning wheel. He helped Orwin measure the skeins into lengths and held them for Orgosh to snip with a pair of rusty shears. One day, the three brewed a potion of roots and herbs. Dalvin was left alone to stir the huge steaming kettle with a long iron spoon. He obeyed the hag's warning not to taste the liquid, but soon the potion began boiling so briskly that a few drops bubbled up and by accident splashed his fingers. With a cry of pain, Dalvin let the spoon fall, and it popped his fingers into his mouth. His outcry brought Ordu, Orwin, and Orgosh hurrying back into the college. Oh, the poor sparrow, gasped Orwin, seeing the boy sucking at his blistered knuckles. He's gone and burned himself. I'll fetch an ointment for the sweet fledgling, and some spider webs to bandage him. What did you do with all those spiders, Orgosh? They were here only yesterday. Too late for all that, growled Orgosh. Worse damage is done. Yes, I'm afraid so, Ordu says. There's no learning without pain. Dear Gosling has had his pain, and now, I dare say, has some learning to go along with it. Dalvin, meanwhile, had swallowed the drops of liquid, scalding his fingers. He licked his lips at the taste, and sweet and bitter at the same time. And in that instant, he began to shake with fear and excitement. All that had been common and familiar in the cottage he saw as he had never seen before. Now he understood that the leather bellows lying by the hearth commanded the four winds. The pail of water in the corner, the seas and oceans of the world, the earthen floor of the cottage held the roots of all plants and trees. The fire showed him the secrets of its flames and how all things come to ashes. He gazed, awestruck, at the enchantresses, for such they were. The threads you spin and measure and cut off, Dalman murmured. These are no threads, but the lives of men. I know who you truly are. Oh, I doubt it, Ordu said, cheerfully answered. Even we aren't always sure of that. Nevertheless, one taste of that magical brew and you know as much as we do. Almost as much, at any rate. Too much for his own good, muttered Orga. But what shall we do, moaned Belmont. He was such a sweet, innocent little robin. If only he hadn't swallowed the potion, is there no way we can make him unswallow it? They could try, said Orga. No, declared Orga. What's done is done. You know that as well as I. As last the dear duckling will have to leave us. There is nothing else for it. So, for many people knowing so much under the same roof, all that knowledge crammed in, crowded, bumping and jostling back and forth, would not have room to breathe. I say he should be kept, growled Orga. I don't think he'd like your way of keeping him, Ordu answered. She turned to Dalban. No, my poor chicken, we must say farewell. You asked us once about the world. I'm afraid you'll have to see it for yourself. But Ordu, pressed Orwin, we can't let him march off just like that. Surely we have some little trinket he'd enjoy. A going away present so that he won't forget us. I could give him something to remember us by, began Orgash. No doubt, said Ordu, but that's not what Orwin had in mind. Of course, we shall offer him a gift. Better yet, he shall choose one for himself. As Dalban watched, the enchantresses unlocked an iron-bound chest and rummaged inside, flinging out all sorts of oddments until there was a huge heap on the floor. Here's something, Ordu said at last. Just the thing for a bold young chicken. A sword. Dalban caught his breath in wonder as Ordu put the weapon in his hands. The hilt, studded with jewels, glistened so brightly that he was dazzled and nearly blinded. The blade flashed, and thread of fire ran along its edges. Take this, my duckling, and you shall be the greatest warrior in all of Prydain. Strength and power, dear Goslin. When you command, all must obey your slightest whim. It's a fine blade, Dalban replied, and comes easily to my hand. It shall be yours, Ordu said, at least as long as you're able to keep it. Oh yes, the enchantress went on. I should mention, it's already had a number of owners. Somehow, sooner or later, it wanders back to us. The difficulty, you see, isn't so much as getting power as holding on to it. Because so many others want it too, you'd be astonished to the length some would go. Be warned, the sword can be lost or stolen, or bent out of shape, as indeed, so can you, in a manner of speaking. And remember, put in Orwin, you must never let it out of your sight, not for an instant. Dalbin hesitated for a moment, then shook his head. I think your gift is more of a burden than a blessing. In that case, Ordu said, perhaps this will suit you better. As Dalbin laid down the sword, the enchantress handed him a golden harp so perfectly wrought that he had no sooner than held it than it seemed to play of itself. Take this, my sparrow, said Ordu, and be the greatest bard in all Prydain, known throughout the land for the beauty of your songs. Dalbin's heart leaped as the instrument thrilled in his arms. He touched the sweeping curve of the glowing harp, ran his fingers over the golden strings. I have never heard such music, he muttered. Who owns this will surely have no lack of fame. You'll have fame and admiration aplenty, said Ordu, as long as anyone remembers you. Alas, that's true, Orwin said with a try. Memory can be so skimpy. It doesn't stretch very far, and the next thing you know, there's your fame, all gone, crumbly and mildewed. Sadly, Dalbin set down the harp. Beautiful it is, he said. But in the end, I fear little help to me. There is nothing else we can offer at the moment, said Ordu, delving once more into the chest, unless you would care to have this book. The enchantress held up a large, heavy tome and blew away the dust and cobwebs from its moldering leather binding. It's a bulky thing for a young lamb to carry, but naturally it would be rather weighty, for it holds everything that was ever known, is known, and ever will be known. It's full of wisdom, thick as oatmeal, added Orwin. Quite scarce in the world. Wisdom, not oatmeal. But that only makes it the more valuable. We have so many requests for other items, Ordu said. 7-league boots, cloaks of invisibility, and such great nonsense. For wisdom, practically none. Yet whoever owns this book shall have all that and more, if he likes. For the odd thing about wisdom is the more you use it, the more it grows. And the more you share it, the more you gain. You'd be amazed at how few understand that. If they did, I suppose they wouldn't need the book in the first place. Do you give this to me? Dalbin asked. A treasure greater than all treasures? Ordu hesitated. Give? Only in a manner of speaking. If you know us well, as you say you do, then you also know we don't exactly give anything. Put it this way. We shall let you take that heavy, dusty old book, if that's what you truly want. Again, be warned, the greater the treasure, the greater the cost. Nothing is given for nothing, not in the marshes of Morva, or any place else for the matter of that. Even so, Dalbin replied, the book is my choice. Very well, said Ordu, putting the ancient volume in his hands. Now you shall be on your way. We're sorry to see you go, though sorrow is something we don't usually feel. Farewell, dear chicken. We mean this in the polite sense, for whether you fare well or ill is entirely up to you. So Dalbin took leave of the enchantresses and set off eagerly, curious to see what lay in store not only in the world, but between the covers of the book. Once the cottage was well out of sight and the marshes far behind him, he curbed his impatience no longer, but sat down by the roadside and opened the heavy tome and began to read. As he scanned the first pages, his eyes widened and his heart quickened, for here was knowledge he had never dreamed of. The pathways of the stars, the rounds of the planets, the ebbs and flows of the time and tide, all the secrets of the world and all its hidden lore unfolded to him. Dalbin's head spun giddy with delight. The huge book seemed to weigh less than a feather, and he felt so light-hearted he could have skipped from one mountaintop to the next and never touched the ground. He laughed and sang at the top of his voice, bursting with gladness and pride and strength in what he had learned. "I chose well," he cried, jumping to his feet. "But why should Ordu have warned me that cost? What cost can there be? Knowledge is joy." He strode on, reading as he went. Each page lightened and sped his journey, and soon he came to a village where the dwellers danced and sung amid holiday. They offered him meat and drink and shelter for the night. But Dalbin thanked them for their hospitality and shook his head, saying that he had meat and drink enough in the book he carried. And by this time he had walked many miles. His spirit was fresh and his legs unweary. He kept on his way, hardly able to contain the happiness as he read and resolving not to rest until he had come to the end of this book. But he had finished less than half when the pages, to his horror, began to go dark, stained with blood and tears. For now the book told him of other ways of the world, of cruelty, of suffering, of death. And he read of greed and hatred and war, and of men striving against one another, and fire and sword, and the blossoming of earth trampled underfoot, of harvests lost and lives cut short. And the book told him that even in the same village he had passed, a day would come when no house would stand, when women would weep for their men, and children would for their parents, and where they had offered him meat and drink, they would starve for lack of crust of bread. And each page he read pierced his heart. The book, which had seemed so little, now grew heavy, that his pace faltered and he staggered under the burden. Tears blinded his eyes, and he stumbled to the ground. All night he lay, shattered by despair. At dawn he stirred and found it, and took all his effort even to lift his head. Bones aching, throat parched, he crept on hands and knees to quench his thirst from the puddle of water. There, at the sight of his reflection, he drew back and cried out in anguish. His fair, bright curls had gone frost white and fell below his brittle shoulders. His cheeks, once full and flushed with youth, were now hollow and wrinkled, half hidden by a long gray beard. His brow, smooth yesterday, was scarred and furrowed. His hands gnarled and knotted, his eyes pale as if the color had been swept away. Dalbin bowed his head. "Yes, Ordu," he whispered, "I should have heeded you. Nothing is given without cost. But is the cost of wisdom so high? I thought knowledge was joy. Instead, it is grief beyond bearing." The book lay nearby. Its last pages were still unread, and for a moment Dalbin thought to tear them to shreds and to scatter them to the wind. Then he said, "I have begun it. I will finish it, whatever else it may foretell." Fearfully and reluctantly, He began to read once more. But now his heart lifted. These pages told not only of death, but of birth as well. How the earth turned in its own time and in its own way gives back to what is given to it. How things lost may be found again. How one day ends for another begins. He learned that the lives of men are short and filled with pain, yet each one a priceless treasure, whether it be that of a prince or a pig keeper. And at last the book taught him that while nothing was certain, all was possible. At the end of knowledge, wisdom begins, Dobbin murmured. And at the end of wisdom, there is not grief, but hope. He climbed to his withered legs and hobbled along his way, clasping the heavy book. After a time, a farmer drove by in a horse-drawn cart and called out to him, "Come, grandfather, ride with me if you like. That book must be a terrible load for an old man like you." "Thank you just the same," Dobbin answered. "But I have strength enough now to go to the end of my road." "And where might that be?" "I do not know," Dobbin said. "I go seeking it." "Well then," said the farmer, "may you be lucky enough to find it." "Luck?" Dobbin answered. He smiled and shook his head. "Not luck, but hope. Indeed, hope." And this concludes The Foundling, the story of Dobbin the Enchanter of Prydain. I hope you enjoyed this little tale, and that if you like it, look for more books by Lloyd and stories by Lloyd Alexander, especially the Chronicles of Prydain. And with this, I pray that we have beat back some of this creature of the night that we call fear, that we call lockdown, that we call being trapped inside with none but our minds. But in being trapped in with our minds, we're also given a chance to explore our imaginations. And even Albert Einstein stated that the imagination was the most important thing in the world. More important than knowledge. And in that is its own wisdom. I bid you well in your journey. And I hope that again we will see each other soon. Fare thee well, my friends. Fare thee well.